Strategy special topic session. I think many of you have been to a special topic session before. Usually they are on the computer, so I'm excited to be in person with people today. But for our special topic sessions, we highlight different projects or initiatives or topics going on around Snohomish County. And Daryl has agreed to lead us through a tour of Qualco today, which we're very excited about. I'm going to hand it off to Kari to talk a little bit about SLS, and we can do a quick round of intros, and then we'll pass it over to our tour guides.
Okay, so I'll walk into the screen here. So Kari with Snohomish Conservation District, and you all have some familiarity with SLS, Sustainable Land Strategy? Yeah. So I'll do brief, but essentially it's been around for 12 years now. It was formed by the Snohomish County, but it came to be, and Daryl can speak to this better than I, but between the farmers and the fish folks trying to find the way to meet in the middle and to have the projects that work for everybody. So it's grown into a larger coalition of the willing, and that's why we're all here today. So there's a mix of people I see in the room, from nonprofits to non-regulatory to farmers and the tribes. And it is really all of these. So grab a sticker, please, put it on your water bottle. We got these made. And my partner in crime on this is Lindsay Desmond, and she's with Department of Fish and Wildlife. And between the two of us, we keep this ship running, and we would love for more people to be involved with the engagement of Sustainable Land Strategy and the actual getting people to know what we're doing with Sustainable Land Strategy. So when you talk to somebody, they don't go, what? And I know we say SLS and it rolls off our tongue, but at the same time, reminding everybody to spell it out. Sustainable Land Strategy, where we are, Snohomish County. Because we are one group. King County has another. Further up north, they have another. From our talk at the Sailor Sea Conference this year, we were dealing with people in British Columbia, and they had a heck of a year. So we're all dealing with the same sort of stuff. So please follow us, Farm Fish Flood, grab a sticker, and we're really glad to be here today. And Daryl, thank you for hosting us, and the Werkhovens that are around. But at this point, I think we want to just have everybody go around, say your name and who you work for, and maybe what interested you about this tour today. Start with Daryl.
Okay. Daryl Lilly, I'm the president of Qualco Energy. I'm an environmental consultant for the Tulalip Tribes, and I'm the chairman of the State Conservation Commission.
Co-chair of SLS.
And co-chair of SLS.
I'm John from Nieuwenhuyzen. Wear a lot of different hats, but mostly Werkhoven Dairy, Peoples Creek Dairy, and Qualco. So I run operations at Qualco and sit on the board.
Summer Doherty with the Snohomish Conservation District. I'm a senior project manager with the Habitats and Floodplain team, and was actually hired 3 months ago to work in the ag and habitats field to help implement the ag resiliency plan.
Samantha Rudolph, also with Snohomish Conservation District. I'm a CAD technician, so I help the engineers with their projects to help farmers and kind of everyone. So, and I'm just interested in, I'm kind of new, so I'm interested in learning more about sustainable land strategies and conservation in general.
Good morning, Teresa Muskovic. I'm with DNR in their Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead program, which is, in a simple way of describing it, basically a program that distributes EPA funds through grants. And one of the grants that I manage, because I'm a grant manager with the HSIL, is one Lindsay's. So I heard about the field trip and fairly new to kind of this program and trying to meet people and get up to speed kind of on what the community and SLS is all about.
Hi, Sophia Harbison. I work with Teresa on the Habitat Strategic Initiative Lead program, and I'm on the DFW side. Our team is co-led by DFW and DNR, so our team is a mix of both of those agency staff. And I work on our floodplains and estuaries implementation strategy, which is really focused on in Puget Sound supporting and furthering integrated floodplain management principles like SLS. So I'm really excited to meet all of you and learn more about that.
Kirk Lakey, and with Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm the Assistant Regional Habitat Program Manager of the Central District, which is basically the Snohomish watershed, Stillaguamish watershed, and Island County.
Good morning, everyone. Heather Cole. I'm with the Nature Conservancy, and I've been supporting their Floodplains by Design program for a while, and also just supporting our local efforts here on how to do integrated floodplain management. How do you bring together fish, farm, flood interests so we can find agreement on actions to move forward on? Nice to be here.
Ryan Barlheimer. I'm an engineer with Snohomish Conservation District. Grew up on a dairy farm in Snohomish, and I was just thinking back that the first time I was on this farm, it was right about 25 years ago when I was helping the Washington State Reformatory system go through the design, permits, and construction of the big pond where all the digester equipment was.
I'm Marty Jacobson with the Department of Ecology. I'm a non-point source water quality specialist, so I work on a variety of different things, from complaint response to trying to get more trees in the ground and things like that. And I'm here because I really don't know much about facilities like this.
Hi, I'm C.K. Item. I am a regional biologist for Ducks Unlimited. I cover the west side of Washington and implement conservation projects, anything from tidal restoration to farm plumbing. And then I'm also on sustainable land strategy steering committee.
I'm Sarah Parker. I am an environmental consultant with Peak Sustainability Group, working with David Roberts. We have been supporting SLS, mostly with meeting support and helping to coordinate these special topic sessions since September.
And she's our climate specialist.
Yes.
I'm David Roberts. I own Peak Sustainability Group with my wife Allison, and for the last 3 years I've been the primary facilitator for the meetings and activities, and I arranged to have our staff in various modes help with the communications team, the comp plan team, the monitoring folks, anything that that SLS needs for help right now. And it's a great process. I'm also a recovering bureaucrat, and doing my penance now for the last 11 years in consulting.
Thanks. Alan Warren with Bonneville Environmental Foundation. We're in transition mode of kind of taking over the backbone role for Floodplains by Design. And previously I was with the Pierce Conservation District, and many hats there, but one of which was the ag lead of a sister partnership down in the Tualco watershed called Floodplains for the Future. So I'm very familiar with the structure of farm fish and floods work, but trying to get out and meet all the other SLS and FFTF type projects around the state and learn the local dynamics and the local people and get to know everybody.
I'm Jim Eichner. I'm an imposter. I saw this thing in a bunny trail on my Google News feed, so through one of the local newspapers. I live in Monroe. I do a little farming over in Snohomish, and I'm the rector of the Episcopal Church of the Holy Cross in Redmond.
But you're not a stranger here.
I'm not, no, I mean, that's nothing. I've learned a few more things today.
Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Oh, sure. I'm Lindsay Goswell. I am with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I co-lead the SLS Communications and Outreach Group with Kari. And a big thank you to Cynthia and Teresa here. We would not be funded without EPA's National Estuary Program funding that helps support SLS.
Ryan Barrett, the Everett Herald, just here to cover the tour. So.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. I guess I'll go back to the beginning to start with here. Actually, this is an old banner behind me about the Haskell Slough project that occurred back in the late 1990s. Dale Reiner was working with Northwest Schmidt Recovery and other folks to do a restoration project on Haskell Slough near here. And Tulalip actually kind of held that one up a little bit because we weren't very happy with the original designs for the project. So after we filed some comments during the permitting process, we got together with the folks trying to design it and helped redesign the project to something that we were comfortable with as well, and the project moved forward. After that, a legislative lobbyist that the farmers were working with was also a close friend of our tribal chairman we had at the time. And he thought it was a good time to kind of pull people together between the tribes and the farmers to try to figure out how we could work together better. Because back in those days, the tribes and the farmers really weren't talking to each other very much. And across the state, most of the time when they talked to each other was in front of a judge. So relationships weren't very good at the time. So he pulled our chairman in and pulled in Daryl and John Sayer, who was the head of Northwest Chinook Recovery at the time, because the farmers of the Northwest Chinook Recovery worked together fairly well, and started talking about how we could work together better. And during those discussions, they thought, well, maybe if we did a joint project, it would help build the relationships. And one of them brought up the idea of doing a dairy digester. So our chairman invited my brother in at the time to start talking about it, because he was a supporter of the idea of doing a digester. And actually the previous year I had gone to a workshop up in Bellingham on dairy digesters and thought it was a pretty good idea myself. So we brought in Andy Werkhoven to talk about it some more, along with a couple other farmers, to see if we could move on the idea. And the more we talked about it, the more people we brought in. Initially, we were looking at tying in 4 or 5 farms to this project. But by the time we were able to get the design work done and get the funding for it, we hit the big recession in 2008. And all the farmers, except for the Werkhovens, decided they didn't want to gamble on it because it was a new idea for them. And with economics the way they were, they didn't want to risk financially their farms to try to get involved in a project like this. But the Werkhoven Dairy decided to keep moving forward, and Tulalip was happy to move forward with them. We had a $250,000 grant from the Department of Energy to do a feasibility study, which we did. And then we went to the state legislature to ask about obtaining this property, because it was owned by the Department of Corrections at the time. They were using it as an honor farm, but they had really ceased use a few years prior. They had one prisoner escape from the farm here who really shouldn't have been on the farm, because it was supposed to be for low-risk prisoners only, and he didn't quite meet the definition of low risk. But after he escaped, they decided that running the farm here wasn't such a good idea, and it was costing them a lot of money to do it, because they had to have so many guards for every so many prisoners. And it was just an expensive operation for them. But when the Northwest Chinook Recovery, the farmers, the tribes all went to the legislature asking for this, they said, yeah, we'll give you the farm. One of the legislators came out after the hearing afterwards, said anytime that the 3 of you can agree on something, we will support it. Because they were used to us all fighting with each other in front of them. And, but that really helped build the relationship between the tribes and the farmers in this community. And that relationship's just been growing every year since. We built this project in 2008 and started operation in December that year, and it's been running ever since. We were shut down for a few months the year before last now to rebuild the digester, because the recirculation pipes were disintegrating, and other parts were just kind of falling apart. The concrete on the top was starting to weaken, and it was just time we had to shut down and rebuild it. So now it's kind of operating like a new digester again. When we started operation, we bought our own generator, was generating power for the local utility, But we're finalizing an agreement now with the PUD where they're going to take over the power generation. They purchased a new generator that's being installed now, and they're going to take over that part of the operation, and we're just going to sell them the raw gas, and they'll generate the electricity themselves. But Tulalip wanted to get into this project primarily for water quality purposes. When you spread raw manure on the fields, it takes about a year to a year and a half for the nutrients to kind of shift to a form that the crops can actually use. And during that time, when the floods hit, it washes away some of those nutrients. And the Snohomish River was on the probably still on the 303D list for repaired water bodies because of high nutrient loading. So we were trying to look at ways we can address that issue. So by using an anaerobic digester, we help eliminate a lot of that manure that could have been washed out during the floods that ends up in the river and then eventually out into Puget Sound, where we also have a nutrient loading problem. And for the dairy, they get the more efficient use of the nutrients from their cow manure, as well as getting nutrients from the food waste we bring in. Under state law, we can bring in up to 30% of what goes in the digester as pre-consumer food waste without having to get a solid waste permit. So they made that law change in 2009, just a few months after we started operations. So we've been bringing in food waste ever since, and just a better way of managing food waste, and it also helps the dairy with their nutrients. So you want to add anything, John?
It's hard to know where to start. I guess I can speak to the intended and unintended benefits of the digester as far as how it relates to the farm. First and foremost, the relationship with Tulalip Tribes and the initiation of Qualco is just something that was not heard of across the country. In the U.S., digesters were kind of slow adapters. You go to Germany or Europe, they're all over the place, and trying to figure out how to make them pay was a pretty big challenge here in the U.S. So I think when everybody decided, chose that model and said, okay, it's gonna help with E. coli and Salmonella bacteria kills. It's gonna have benefits in that regard. That was kind of the main focus at the beginning. Nobody was talking about carbon credits or greenhouse gas or renewable energy. There's a lot of unintended benefits that a decade later, now it's all the rage. We're talking about it and really harnessing in on some of these income streams that weren't there at the beginning. So for the farm, what the digester has allowed the farm to do is, well, actually before the system, farmers and farms don't continue to operate unless the communities around them, their neighbors, want them to succeed. And that's where there's a huge disconnect between people not knowing where their food comes from, how does a farm operate, what does it take to actually produce food sustainably, and that's a word that's thrown around really everywhere without meaning. And I'm a city kid at heart. I grew up in San Diego. I grew up in a milk processing plant, so talk to me about chemistry and biology of milk and making food. That was my forte. There was a 1,000 cow dairy that was connected to the plant that I worked at, and the only thing I knew about cows was they got washed in a cool sprinkler pen, and then they got milked and back out to the pen. So the dairy for me was just a place to go play on the weekends, and I really thought the rest of my life I was going to be making cheese and bottling milk and just working on that side. But I really appreciated seeing that side, because I see a product like milk, where it goes and who it feeds. and going through college and really trying to connect the dots between farms, food production, and now there's a whole new realm of, well, habitat and the environment around us. It's been really neat to connect those dots. But first and foremost, farms are not going to continue unless other people want it to be successful. And you need a next generation. There's an extreme amount of debt and assets. It's a capital intense business with very low margins. And I think that's where farmers everybody kind of understands that it's a low margin business. You know, if you talk about a farmer, oh, they work hard, they work long hours, and it's usually little pay. But there's kind of this facade that says, oh, you got a $300,000 tractor there and a $500,000 tractor there, and oh, you have $3 million worth of cows. You must be doing good. But it's a little bit of a facade because it's still farming pennies. Pennies are really important. So this farm was lucky to have a next generation come in, but in order for that next generation to really sign on the dotted line, there needed to be some security. You know, is this farm going to exist in 20 years? If I'm going to take on that much debt and sign the line, you know, what's the future hold for me if housing is coming in and people don't want to care about their farmers anymore? And this valley especially, there used to be tons of farms, and dairy farms specifically, and there's been a huge mass exodus where there's a consolidation, and you go, wow, what does the future hold for me? And I think this Qualco project, you know, Daryl said that Werkhovens were the only ones that continued with it, and I know distinctly that the only reason that Werkhoven stayed on was because members of Tulalip Tribes said, we're not going to let you fail. This is a partnership. We're partners with you. You can feel comfortable taking this risk because we're in it together. There's not this, as long as my butt's covered, you have to take care of yourself kind of thing. So that relationship really spoke highly to me and my wife and in our decision making to come on the farm here. So that was over a decade ago. So since then, this farm has benefited from the Qualco project as far as being able to grow. You know, all businesses need to grow, so we've doubled the amount of acres that we farm. We now have a second dairy facility where we used to just have one, so our cow numbers are doubled. Access to land, super important. Our competitors in land buying here are duck clubs and people that want to buy farms for hunting or anything but farming. So there's different pressures that we feel, but to me, the strategic relationships and partnerships is really what makes this business successful. And whether that be through DFW, conservation districts, local governments, I really see deep roots here that make me not want to have to move somewhere else, because there's an extreme amount of pressure to move to the middle of nowhere because it's easier to farm there. You don't have to ask permission to do things. They want you to farm there. So that's some of the big benefits that allows this farm to keep going, and the fact that you don't have to feel like an outsider or you don't have to feel alienated is super big too, because Tulalip coined the phrase, cows are better than condos. And at first I didn't know really what that meant. I just thought it was a funny phrase. But you really, once you're in the system for so long and understanding all the different decisions that you're making, soil is the best water filter we have on the planet. If soil goes away, you're without. There's no way to fix it. So preserving farmland and making sure farmland is here for future generations is super important for both fish and people. But at the same time, when I look at projects that are done around, whether that be habitat or construction or any restoration, anything like that, the fact of the matter is, when everybody's done with their project, there needs to be somebody who owns it at the end of the day. Who's the caretaker? Who's the steward of this when everybody's had the good feeling of getting it done and now moves on to the next project? And that's where farmers play a huge role in being able to be the stewards and be caretakers. And Tulalip said that right up front, said, we need you farmers to stay here. Please don't move away. So I guess that's kind of my perspective. And I know our family is really deeply rooted in that too. So
Yeah, I can't imagine life without milk, cheese, or ice cream.
Yeah, and well, speaking on that a little bit, at least from the milk chemistry side, sales and commercials and dairy-free, soy, whatever. That's it's kind of like little zingers in the dairy industry. But the fact of the matter is, the milk that's produced here on this farm and every farm, it feeds local communities first, because it's a fluid, it has water in it, it can't travel far. But that's where technology and the miracle of our food system is that this farm is actually feeding people that need protein and fat on the other side of the world. And I used to think farmers farm for their local communities. That is true in some sense, but farmers are actually feeding countries on the other side of the world that don't have access to fertile land, soil, cheaper food, proteins and fats and energies. So the chemistry of milk, it's really amazing to me that milk is like this superfood that can make good tasting food for countries like ours, where there's no shortage of food here. Food is people like to, how do I say it, date their foods here. It's all an experience and flavor and all that, but I have a huge amount of respect for food production industries because of where that food is going and the real need to feed more than just who's around here.
Yeah, and earlier I mentioned that we had a $250 million grant from Department of Energy for the feasibility study. I forgot to do the rest of that, which is, we also had a $500,000 grant through the Rural Development Branch of Natural Resource Conservation Service. And we had a $2.7 million bond authorized through the Clean Renewable Energy Program at the IRS. Unfortunately, that program hasn't been funded in several years now, so there's no money available there. But that was a 15-year bond, and we'll be making the final payment on that bond this December. So after 15 years, we're finally getting our original debts paid off. But anyway, does anyone have any questions before we go outside and start looking at things?
John, where do you get the food waste from?
The food waste that comes to this site comes from the backsides of Whole Foods, Walmart's, Costco's, any fast food restaurant that you see anywhere, meat packing plants. There's specialty companies out there that decontainerize and recycle plastics and glasses in the beverage industry. So past pull date, beer, wine, soda, those kind of things. They recycle the plastics and glass, but the liquid needs a place to go. So a portion of the products that we take actually have really good feed value. Spent grains from breweries and that kind of thing. A whiskey company in Woodinville is a pretty good example. So we end up taking the more feed value products and they feed them back to cows and replace some of our feed costs that way.
Do you have to collect it yourself, or does somebody on contract?
At first, there was a lot of work put into, hey, that's got value, I'll come get it, I'll figure out how to truck it and all this kind of stuff. But as the years have gone by, there's companies are very incentivized to be more responsible with where it goes. So it's part of the cost that's really put onto the consumer at the end of the day. The Starbucks and McDonald's of the world, you know, if there's a bad batch of something that isn't fit for human consumption for any quality reason or another, what do they do with it? So that's a cost that's put into the products themselves.
And then as far as your, so Qualco's part of your overall nutrient management system for the farm, do you have more cows than you have agronomic rates to apply? And is that how some of it can go to Qualco? Or what's the balance in the equation here so you still have enough nutrients to go on the land?
Yeah, so speaking to like when I first moved here a decade ago and started taking over the management of Qualco and the management of nutrients on the farm, we were short nutrients, and we actually still are. So in the agronomic side of things, there's agronomic rates of application, and the big thing about cow manure is nitrogen and phosphorus are not at a ratio that you can apply both equally at the same time and agronomically use it in the plants. So we've incorporated things like crop rotation, high protein grasses, and corn silage to balance those nutrient uptakes. So a field 1 year, that's where Qualco's really brought in the technology into farming thing. We're able to be very precise with nutrient applications because we have automated controls, flow meters, sensors that take readings of what's actually in the manure as you're applying it, GPS on tractors, so you have mapped out fields of exactly where your nutrients go, and pre and post soil testing. It's a huge other hat that you have to wear in that department, but basically the farm itself farms more acres than what it has nutrients available to apply. The challenge is more, can you afford to bring those nutrients to where it needs to go and still make a profit at the end of the day? And that's where concentrating nutrients, fractionating them into their different forms, and removing water makes it more, how do you say,
more economical.
Yeah, more economical to transport further.
So it's more dry material. In other words.
Yeah. So for future expansion, we're looking at adding equipment for concentrating the nutrients more. So it's more economical for the dairy to use on their own properties, but also potentially make it more economical to ship to other farms.
So that's unusual. Many farms have more than they can handle from their dairy waste systems, and then they're trying to give it away. But you're saying it's the opposite here.
There's different forms of it. So so some of the not unintended but uncalculated portions of it is not just the slurry that comes out of a cow, and you have to deal with a product that's hard to manage. There's sources of bedding, like we'll see a barn here where there's fresh sawdust put in the pen and then manure's incorporated, but then it's not in a pumpable system. So what do you do with it? And you either have to truck it yourself and burn the diesel and move it multiple times in order to get it to where it needs to go, or can you make a more economical decision for your farm? Like, yes, that has value, but I can't access that value if I have to touch it 4 or 5 times to get it to a field. It's better if I find a source to sell it or give it away for free and save those costs on my farm and then make it up somewhere else. So on this farm in particular, we're nitrogen deficient and phosphorus rich. So that ratio of N to P is always kind of what we're balancing. We're regulated obviously on nitrogen applications, so but when you apply nitrogen, since we're not regulated on phosphorus, but still looking at countries like Europe and other parts of the world where it's coming down the pipeline, you're always limited on your phosphorus application. So don't over apply phosphorus, but that actually shorts you on nitrogen. And where we used to have to buy commercial fertilizer to make it up, we've gotten better at balancing those out, getting that ratio back to an easier to manage product with the digester. Organic nitrogen is mineralized, so it's more readily available for plants to uptake. So we always describe it to people as spoon feeding. You know, instead of putting a lot of organic nutrients out there that take time to break down, you need microbes in soil to break down those nutrients and mineralize them for plants to uptake. The digester actually speeds up that process, and you don't have to apply more organic nitrogen to do so. You can spoon feed it in between cuttings of grass. So if we have 6 or 7 cuttings of grass, okay, 30 pounds of nitrogen in between cuttings, and that's what you need for the year to get it done. So it gives you the ability to apply more often, but at lower rates and safer rates that you're not wasting, but you're not shorting at the same time.
Which is really important right now because prices for fertilizers have gone through.
There's 2 big takeaways this year. Fertilizer is a finite resource, so you better be recycling it. Don't throw away nutrients. And, oh, by the way, it's doubled in price this year, so you can't afford to buy chemical fertilizer even if you wanted to.
And alongside that, the economics of all of this, where you started, Daryl, talking about this project where you had 8 or 10 farmers and then the recession hit and they all fell off and you ended up with 1. Like, is this, and I know like down in Enumclaw where I'm at, there's a farm, a dairy with an anaerobic digester, but is this something that is economically scalable in the sense of more farmers could be and maybe should be doing this, as far as like, does it benefit the bottom line in a way where, going back to your point about all the debt and the capital and the $2.7 million worth of grants and bonds and what have you, is this a feasible thing for others to be doing?
Now it's becoming more interesting or easier to apply on your farm technology. When Qualco was started, there was no, you're going to get paid this much extra to have this digester because you're implementing a practice that's good. There was no paycheck at the end of the day. Qualco doesn't pay Werkhoven Dairy. Werkhoven Dairy doesn't pay Qualco. It's its own standing entity. But we had to be a model for others to prove that the concept does pay for itself. Qualco has been able to pay its own bills. It doesn't have to be subsidized by external entities. The tribe doesn't subsidize it. The only thing that makes Qualco special is it's voluntarily run. There's nobody on payroll, so anybody that's involved with Qualco does it for free. And the equipment that it takes to get it done is a donation, by Werkhoven Dairy. The labor is all subsidized by Werkhoven Dairy. So Qualco has been able to make it pay because of that relationship. The farmers taking the responsibility of running and managing, because we're already in a low margin business, we're really stewardly with what we have and don't have. It's worked for us, but it's been hard to replicate that around the country because not every area has access to things like food waste, where you can charge fees for disposal. There's a lot of things that are hard to replicate. But now, 15 years after it started, there's a huge wave of digesters going across the country for another reason, carbon credit sales. So the BPs and Shells of the world in the oil industry, they're actually funneling a bunch of money into dairies or not dairies themselves, but into companies that are selling digesters to dairies, because they go, holy crap, we've had this amount of carbon credits available for the last 30, 40 years, and it only takes a digester to tap into it. So there's actually a huge wave coming across the country now building.
And are you all tapping into those carbon credit
We're
transactions?
late bloomers. We thought we would get compensated for being an early adapter, but actually if you implement practices like operating a digester, you don't get credited for the last 15 years that you've been doing it. You have to start from scratch.
If you're putting in a new one, you can.
Putting in a new one would probably change the game a little bit, but how carbon credits are valued on a farm or even for a Qualco it's all on nutrient management. So you have a carbon index score. What's your carbon index score before you implemented these new manure management techniques, and depending on that score, that's
so your baseline was already.
If you were already implementing, your score is way less than somebody who has done nothing for the last 10 years.
But going forward,
but economically right now is a good time for farmers, because these things can allow you to use your nutrients more efficiently. And with the cost of fertilizer as high as it is, that's a big hit.
It's
the other thing
savings.
is, if you're in an area like this where you have a lot of food waste available, it's really the food waste that pays for most of this operation.
And you were saying that was a state legislative change that allowed, or was that county?
It was a state legislative change that allowed us to do it without getting a solid waste permit. But from what we understand, it wouldn't be that difficult to get a solid waste permit, in which case we could go a higher percentage. So we're also looking at putting in another digester where we can bring in more food waste and and with equipment to concentrate that food waste to where we could transport it to other farms. We can help other farmers save on their nutrient costs as well.
Would there be other opportunities in the valley to either bring more of the waste here or branch out where there's other digesters and other farms that would make sense for Qualco?
There's a huge tidal wave of food waste that's looking for a home. Wastewater districts are calling. Because if they don't have a home, they go down the drain. And
so other dairy farmers, do you think any of them have the appetite for partnering or replicating what you've done?
The big thing is the distance to transport. The dairies that were originally going to tie into this system, the Werkhoven Dairy acquired one of them, and I think both the other two went out of business. This clock and.
Were they going to be plumbed in like you were, or are they going to have to transport stuff?
There were some that were going to have to transport, and then that's when diesel prices shot up, and they said, that doesn't make sense.
For the Werkhoven Dairy, they piped the manure down here, so there's no trucking of the manure itself. And we just don't have any other dairies that are close enough to easily tie in by pipeline, and the trucking cost would be rather high. I'm trying to blank on his name, the farmer out at Sylvana.
Visser?
Yeah, the Visser Dairy was planning on using a different technology that would actually discharge clean water. But things kind of fell apart with the company that was going to build it, and they just couldn't make it work. So I don't know if he's looking at doing something like this or not, but I know Jeremy Visser's more limited on space for building these kind of projects as well, and being able to store the liquid effluent. But
there is at least one digester in the works. But speaking back to, like, is this a replicatable thing? There's a lot of middleman companies right now that are selling digesters, but actually they're presenting really nice packages to farmers. If you give me 2 acres, I'll put in this digester, you just have to send me manure. And so it's like the easiest agreement under the sun. And that's what's being implemented now. BP's and Shell are using middleman companies and brokers to buy and run their own digesters. They take all the advantage of carbon credit sales and the natural gas or biogas sales. And then, the farms have a technology on the farm that they don't have anything to do with.
Is it an ongoing revenue stream, or is it like a one-time, like they purchase 2 acres on the pond, or are they able to get any benefit? Are the farmers able to get any benefit of a revenue stream out of that?
I've heard a number of examples. There's actually one farm that used to be here, moved to Idaho, and then moved to Iowa, and they're working with a company that's putting in a digester, and they got $1 million fee up front the day the digester turns on.
Mm-hmm.
And the size of their operation, it's a sizable amount, but not big at the end of the day.
Too attractive.
But it's an attraction, and for us it's hard to see those kind of things. So we go, we had to do it all ourselves. You're coming in here with big bucks saying you'll take care of it all.
But they still benefit from the end product, right? The nutrients.
They'll benefit. Yeah. They'll benefit from the end product, but they won't be able to extract the full value of the project. And that's where we have kind of approached. We want to maintain control over the project, because as soon as somebody else comes in and steers it away from what its original purpose was, that's where I think it gets a little complicated.
Can you speak to the energy generation and how many kilowatt hours it's producing, and if is it being generated and then being used locally or being shipped elsewhere?
Yeah. So since the beginning, you'll see our original genset now is pulled out of the building, but we have been operating a 450 kW genset, which is enough power for about 300 houses. And our power purchase agreement mandated that all of our export energy goes directly onto the grid at wholesale cost, so we were paid less than what retail pays. And then we buy back retail priced energy to run the system and the farm and everything. So it's not a subsidized cost. But now, partnering with PUD, they are putting in a 600 kW genset, so double the production.
Yeah. When we first started operation, our local PUD wasn't interested in working with us, so we actually contracted with Puget Sound Energy. So we were wheeling through PUD to get the energy down to King County, which isn't that far, but PUD charges a huge wheeling fee. But when our 5-year contract expired with PSC, PUD had, you see all the public relations benefits from this project going to Puget Sound Energy, decided they wanted to work with us. So we did a contract with them, and then as that was coming to expire, we kept doing 1-year extensions as we worked on our current agreement where they take over the energy production themselves. So we have a very good working relationship with the PUD now, and that should go on for many years to come.
How much is it to purchase and install a digester? Maybe that varies.
It varies depending on
If you were to
size.
put in a carbon copy of this system, it's going to be around $3 million.
Yeah, but you can get digesters of virtually any size. There's a company in Seattle that builds digesters inside of standard shipping containers that restaurants and grocery stores are using. So, I think their cheapest one is about $250,000.
I had a question about, when you said you started this project in 2008 or so, before you implemented the biodigester, what was the quality, the stream quality, and what kind of how many nutrients did you have in your streams, like around the area? And then after you implemented it, did you see a noticeable change? And if so, what was that?
And actually, I don't know. I haven't really looked at it. I didn't really figure that just having one farm on a digester would really make much difference. We really looked at this as a pilot project to try to encourage other dairies in the region to do the same thing to really help cut down the runoff. But most of that runoff would have been during the flood events. But I haven't looked at the county's water quality data or Department of Ecology's water quality data to see what difference there might have been. But also just changes in annual fluctuation, it'd be hard to really see any difference.
You probably want to take us out there and show us all this cool stuff, but I would just point out, I think, along with what you're saying, John, about an explosion, like in Washington with the Climate Commitment Act, the demand or the requirement now for natural gas companies to supply higher and higher renewable gas percentages in their lines over time is going to be another source of potential stimulus for putting these kinds of facilities in the future.
Yeah, although for tying into the natural gas lines, you have to clean the gas to pipeline quality.
Yeah.
And cost is coming down. When we last looked at it about 10 years ago, I think it was, it would have cost as much to scrub the gas as it did to build the digester in the first place.
Well, now the gas companies will have to do that because it's their responsibility.
But the technology is improving and the cost for scrubbing the gases is getting a lot cheaper, so it might be more economically feasible to do that with these smaller projects. 10 years ago, you needed at least a dairy double the size to make it economical.
Wow. Thanks for sharing your stories.
Yeah.
That's great.
But if there's no other questions, I could go outside and get wet.
Home dairy is a mile and a half north of here on Tualco Loop Road. This is the Honor Farm. And then our second dairy is a mile and a half south of here called Peoples Creek Dairy.
And that one, do you get the waste from that one as well?
That one also has a pipeline here. Yeah. Yeah, so that was going to be a farm that was originally part of the project, and then they ended up getting kicked out or not invited in.
Well, they dropped out. They just didn't want to take the financial risk.
Yeah.
So part of the opportunity is that you have 3 operations that all concentrate into one place and you can pipe to, not truck to.
Exactly. Yeah. There's efficiency in handling. The biggest thing I don't want to do is run a payloader and a truck and touch multiple times, because every time you touch it, it has a cost. So the more you can pump it and put it in one spot once, the better off you are. Yeah. So there's been a huge amount of savings, cost savings on the farm in that regard.
And then we have pipes to many other fields for piping the digestate back out to the fields to apply on the crops that they grow.
Yeah. Access now to fields that never got manure in the past. So the soil on some of the sandiest fields and sandiest farms around have gotten way more fertile because of being able to get organics on them. Building up the organic matter in the soil, and the microbiology in digestate, I love it. You can't get me to get rid of a digester, because those microbes are super important for soil health too. And I think that's a little bit of the disconnect, in the soil health world is, you put nutrients on and it just magically goes into a plant, but it's a living, breathing organism. And everything we run here, like the health of the cow is all biological. The health of the digester is all biological. We're talking microbes. Same with the soil. So we kind of treat and run everything the same. Cows want to be fed the same thing every day, a consistent diet at the same time. They're creatures of habit, but ultimately their stomachs, the rumens, are the most important part. We excrete our own acids in our stomach to break down the chemical bonds of food, but with cows, it's the microbes in their stomachs that are doing that. And all a digester is a giant cow's stomach. You're just giving it more retention time. So it's all the the microorganisms in there that we're trying to keep healthy and growing and flourishing. So
yeah. And at the back end of this, we strip out the solids that we compost. And with the Dale Reiner's old farm, with the flood 99 that washed off a lot of his topsoil. So after we started operations here, we started using the compost here to spread on that field. And I think it took about 5 years of applying that compost before the dairy was able to grow corn up there about the same as corn on their other fields. By using the compost from this facility, we were able to rebuild those soils to make them productive again.
So this is a load of acid whey for making cottage cheese. It's one of the ingredients that we take in. So after we blend here,
We get shoved down there and gets digested.
Stop it. Yeah. Watch where you step.
Digester here, we're sitting 17 feet above the floor. So it's 1.5 million gallons. This is called a plug flow digester. When that tank blends and pumps in 100 gallons, it pumps into one corner of the box, and it's a big horseshoe shape. So 100 gallons pumps in, the hydraulic pressure from that pushes everything in front of it, around, up and around the box, and that's how we're able to achieve the retention time of 16, 17 days of manure and food waste being in here. So the first thing that's happening is we're heating it up to 100 degrees. We're mimicking the biology of a cow's stomach. Initially, we take the heat that's generated off of our engine, heats up a water jacket. That water jacket is plumbed into here and allows it to heat up. So there's one set of bacteria that are excreting acids. We have what's called an acid chamber, the first chamber of the stomach. They're excreting acids. That breaks down the chemical bonds of manure, food waste, and creates volatile fatty acids. And then there's a second set of bacteria, methanogens. They're eating those fatty acids, and those bacteria are the ones that excrete the methane gas. So when they talk about like methane in cows and cow farts, it's actually gas. It's actually cow burps. It's the burps from their stomach is from those bacteria excreting methane. That's a little bit of a fallacy there. Cow's burps. Cow's burps. Yeah. Here is it's the biogas pocket. So it's all contained in the box. We have these windows. So you're looking at like a new lid and a redesign of what it used to be. We put in these windows so we can actually see what's happening as far as crust layers and management in the digester. And we have the ability to put sleeves in and mechanically agitate if we need to. These black lines that are coming in are gas recirculating lines. So we suck the biogas off the top and we actually put it back into the box for agitation. So there's a grid of pipelines on the bottom with duckbill fittings that are agitating and keeping all the solids in suspension. Those bacteria need surface area to grow on and thrive, and if things just settle and solidify, you don't have the environment that they need to thrive.
Yeah, plus you lose capacity.
Yeah. So there's the other things you see, there's temperature probes, and those are, so we can monitor temperatures. We're trying to get up to 100 degrees as fast as possible, and digesters don't like rapid temperature changes. Those bacteria want to stay consistently at that level, so we're always increasing or decreasing heat depending the time of year. In winter time, cold water, manure temperature coming in during the summer versus the winter is very variant. So we're always making sure that we compensate for those.
Gas in. And then we also have the water pipes for the hot water coming back into the digester and the cooling system for the exhaust system on the generator itself. So anyway, it's going to be hard to talk and have anyone hear anything inside, so if you just want to walk around inside to see what's there, that's your option. But I said I've got earplugs here if people want to use them. John, you want to digesting a little bit so the compost is better? Some of the farmers would like to have a dryer for drying the flowers as they grow. And some other uses. We're kind of waiting until after we get our final bunch even beat off and send much more money here.
Then you put it, you use it as bedding, or? We use it for a couple different purposes. So what this is going to be is your high lignin, low digestible fiber at the end of the day. There's always a portion of every plant that's non-digestible or not as digestible as others. But compared to raw manure, so what this is going to be is pathogen-free. E. coli and salmonella are killed off. Weed seeds, when you harvest crops and feed it to cows, cows don't fully digest seeds either. So those seeds pass through the system and end up in the product at the end. But the digester breaks down and kills off those weed seeds. So when you use this on organic fields or in organic crops, you're not putting weed seeds out there.